where the Democrats won the Senate seat. Less than, or about 1.5 percentage points in Michigan, where Democrats won the Senate seat. You know how close Pennsylvania was. And then even in Arizona, you have Ruben Gallego, who, pretty progressive guy. The fourth time in a row, Democrats have won Arizona in a state they just never elected Democrats. So, and of course, Nevada as well comes through for Democrats in the end of the Senate. So how do you balance this? It's a mixed bag. We've got basically a tie in the House of Representatives, close to a tie in the Senate. How much hand-wringing should Democrats really be doing right now?
Look, I think it is, and look, some of the message, yes. Instead of using these acronyms to describe what you're talking about, just say the thing. I go back to Andy Beshear in Kentucky, who won re-election as governor, talking about Bidenomics, but never used the term, right? He talked about the battery factories. He talked about the manufacturing that was happening in his state, what he was doing, and never put a label on it, just said what it was. And I think that for a lot of Democrats across the country, and frankly, Democrats, particularly in Washington, they love an acronym. Democrats love to put a nice little name on something, to put a little bow on it. But what people just want you to do is talk to them about what you are doing. Because I do believe that the policies that the party has, that the things that the Democrats, particularly in Congress and in state houses across the country, have fought for, that they are resonating. Jordan Harris, who's a representative out of Pennsylvania in the state house, said right after the election, he came on our show on the weekend and he said, you know, look, I think the Democratic Party at times is a little too much Starbucks and not enough Dunkin' Donuts. And I think that is the way to think about it. It is not that they have to do this wholesale, I think, rebrand on some things. Parts of the coalition, perhaps, yes. But writ large, go back to talking about the issues. The base is, in some of these places, the base didn't turn out. Joe and Mika, y'all know, the base. The base is not moderate white voters. Black voters in Detroit did not come out to vote. So what was that about?
Well, and you know, Reverend Al came on set about 10 days before the election, and he said they're just not excited in Detroit. He said this is nothing like 2020. And there's a real problem with the level of engagement. That was very surprising to us. We heard it from people knocking on doors in Pennsylvania, knocked on just hundreds of thousands of doors, but just about everybody we talked to said that they came back saying the same thing. We don't like Trump. We're going to vote for him anyway. What do you put that down to, especially because, you know, we said it here over and over again that in 2020, that race was won by black women in Milwaukee, black women in Detroit, black women in Philly, in Atlanta. And I'm just curious, why is it that there wasn't as much energy, especially among black men, for Kamala Harris in 2024? Because that's one of the many things that would make a difference. We can look at Hispanic voters and definitely need to, but if the base had come home, she would have won those states and won the election.
Well, look, I would also think young voters. There was, I believe, a 1 percentage point difference between how Donald Trump did with black men in 2024 than how he did in 2020. And so I would argue that while, yes, this is a race that was won on the margins, the largest shift was with Hispanic voters. Now, the base, Joe, if you just described all these things, Reverend Sharpton was describing what was happening in Detroit because he was out there with the Central Park Five. NAN, his organization, they were taking them around the country, talking to voters. If he knew that, don't you think other people knew that? Right? And so the disconnect is what the ground is saying and then how people are responding to what the ground is saying. And I do believe that in the Democratic Party apparatus, when it comes to campaigns, people have to listen to what the people are saying on the ground and be willing to adjust. Now, you just can't take what happens in one state and apply it writ large. You have to do some case studies. So that's where the data comes in. Focus groups, right? Everybody talk about the polls. What are the focus groups saying? Because focus groups, I think, are more indicative of where people really are. But at the end of the day, the 2024 election was not an election that the voters, the people on the ground, looked at through the prism of the last 105, 107 days. They were experiencing everything for the last 2-3 years. And to be very clear, as a party apparatus, when you have Democrats up and down the ticket and the ballot saying that GDP is up, you know, record GDP growth, right? The fastest recovery of any G7 country. When you have Democrats saying that the economy is really, 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 really great, and you're not hearing the same amount of fervor talking about the housing policy and that the rent is too damn high, and this is what we're doing about that. Maxine Waters talks about this all the time. People felt that there was a disconnect with what their lived reality is. And to be clear, the Democratic Party has a policy there, right? But what they were hearing, what was being elevated, what was being talked about for not just the last 107 days, again, their prism was a lot larger, was different. People's lived reality is very, very important. You cannot discount their lived reality.
No, and I don't think that the Harris campaign did that, Simone. I agree with you, though. There was just so much, Joe, to answer to in such a small amount of time, because from the Trump side, there were questions of democracy, questions of even fascist-type tendencies, things being put out there that needed an answer to as well. And I saw an attempt for them to address the exact issues that Simone is talking about, but it was in this huge haze of many other issues that had to be addressed at the same time, trying to do everything at once.
Yeah, and you know, we would talk
how to
about
do that better.
How
and
well,
Kamala, can I just say, Joe, Kamala Harris couldn't have done it all. That's why I made the point about more than 105 days. Like, she talked about housing. She came out of the gate with all of the things that the American people said was most important to them at the time.
That's right.
But they did not experience this election in just 105 days. And so, you know, the mealy-mouthed Democrats that are like, oh my goodness, we gotta just think about how to throw the playbook all the way out. No, baby. Y'all gotta go back to the basics, okay? Just the basics.
Go back to the basics.
She came out with a housing plan. She came out with things that addressed.
But you know, the thing is, it is, say James Carville's name and the Twitter sphere explodes. But it goes back to it's the economy, stupid. And Dave Weigel, you know, you were out on the campaign trail throughout most of the year reporting from swing states, reporting from across America. You know, we would talk about the things that used to be judged in presidential races. We talk about job numbers being so good, the GDP being stronger, talking about all the positive things that, you know, my professor in the one econ class that I almost failed said macroeconomics. Whereas there's a great Washington Post article where they're interviewing a Hispanic voter in Waterbury, Connecticut, who 8 years ago said he was angry at the Democratic Party because he couldn't vote for Bernie Sanders. This year, he voted for Donald Trump, and he did it because the price of groceries and the price of gas and the price of everything. And it didn't really matter if inflation had dropped to 2.2%. He's looking at the cumulative impact over the past 4 years, and things were just not as good for him economically today as they were 4 years ago because of inflation.
Yeah, that connects to what I was writing about the disconnect, the dissonance people feel in the Biden coalition about the Hunter Biden pardon, about giving up this idea that Democrats are the party of norms and democracy. A thing that a lot of Democrats found out in the election is that this is a very low trust when it comes to politicians' country. People who do not have a lot of esteem for politicians, they might like their governor, their congressman, but if the assumption that most politicians are corrupt has been good for Donald Trump, people haven't connected it haven't connected that as a reason to vote against him. And the idea that Donald Trump was going to act, that he was strong, that he was beset by legal problems because he was such a bold and fearless actor was helpful to him. There were a lot of voters that I talked to, the Post talked to, that found this, that no matter what was thrown at him, no matter what he did on January 6th, the fact that he looked like he was always trying to act and being stymied was powerful. And that overwhelmed some of the political critiques, some of the policy critiques of him. That's one reason that Democrats are a little more comfortable. Now, while they're criticizing in public the Biden pardon, some of them are angry that he said he wouldn't do it, then he did. Some of them, a little more quietly, are saying this is the sort of thing Donald Trump has gotten away with. This is the sort of thing that Bill Clinton got away with in the 90s when he was able to win a midterm, perform well in a midterm, rebuild his image afterward. Voters were more concerned with those, not just the economic problems they had, but more interested is, will this president be strong and act quickly and shake off the doubters and the haters and the lawyers? So this is the context, I think, for the Biden pardon. If the voters had said, no, we care more about the norms, we care more about a president who goes through the process, who is even going to sacrifice his own son to the legal system, then they would have won. They didn't win. So it looks like the country cares more about results or the appearance of results, action or the appearance of action, than it does about whether you're playing by these rules.
And Dave, we're going to get back to your piece in just a minute about the pardon of Hunter Biden just a moment from now. But let's talk about some of these choices that Donald Trump has made to fill vital cabinet positions. More questions this morning about past accusations of sexual assault against Trump's pick for defense secretary, Pete Hegseth. A lawyer for Hegseth repeatedly has claimed in interviews that sources told him the same woman who accused Hegseth of assaulting her in 2017 previously had brought a false rape charge against someone else. Attempts to corroborate that story have been unsuccessful. A New Yorker article published yesterday revealed the contents of a previously undisclosed 2015 whistleblower report from a veterans organization Hegseth ran, which detailed several incidents of alleged drunken and illicit behavior. NBC News has not independently verified that report. New Yorker staff writer Jane Mayer wrote she filed a public records request with the California District Attorney's Office that handled Hegseth's case, looking for information to support his lawyer's claim. Writing, quote, the answer came back promptly and definitively. The claim is spurious. The office had no such evidence of that claim made by his lawyer about the woman accusing him of assault. The district attorney has said it did not file charges in 2017 because, quote, no charges were supported by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. However, Hegseth later paid his accuser an undisclosed sum as part of a 2023 settlement. Hegseth's lawyer has stated in part, this police report confirms what I've said all along, that the incident was fully investigated and police found the allegation to be false. So, Sam Stein, there's a lot in there. What does all of this mean? We heard some positive reviews on his meetings at Capitol Hill yesterday from some Republican senators who said they were willing to overlook all of this stuff that's been out and reported. What does it look like for him at this moment in terms of getting confirmed?
Oh, God. I mean, there are like 4 different cabinet nominees where you can make the case that they are either their fate is tenuous at best or they probably will get in. I think Hegseth is one of the more troubled ones, but then you have Kash Patel, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, among the others. I think in the Hegseth case, look, there's a few things that are happening here that are problematic. One is obviously all this years-old evidence that he either committed acts of sexual assault, was a troubling leader at the head of his nonprofit. Then you have the email that his mother sent him during the aftermath of the divorce. And you ask yourself, well, is that like a personal matter? And should we care too much about that? And the answer is it does actually relate to how he would act as the head of the Department of Defense. He's very public in his criticism of women in combat roles, which is, obviously an important issue for the Defense Department. He's also, the Defense Department's also dealing with issues of rape within its ranks, sexual assault within its ranks, putting someone atop that position. These have direct policy ties to the position he's holding. But then I think on top of that, which is sort of the other big elephant in the room, is that his lack of qualifications. And that's what you hear from lawmakers as much as this stuff, which is he ran a nonprofit, but since then he's been a TV host. And no offense to Joe, Mika, you, Willie, and even Lemire.
No offense taken.
We're good.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to be clear. I love you guys, and I think you're